welcome everyone, and welcome to the LeapSheep Startup Builder Live Q&A. I'm your host, Kirk Drage, the CEO and co-founder here at LeapSheep. At LeapSheep, our mission is really simple: to help startup founders reach product market fit faster, cheaper, and with far less risk. These sessions are designed to help founders make clearer decisions with their time, their money, and their limited runway. Today, we're talking about artificial intelligence, no surprises, but more specifically, we're talking about when should a company begin investing in AI. Now, if you're a founder thinking about when to invest yourself, or perhaps more importantly, if you're a B2B company and working with enterprises or mid-market customers, I think you're going to find this show fabulous. Because we're going to talk about when should an organization buy an existing solution off the shelf, when might it make sense to build a solution or maybe work with a startup, and how can leaders in companies explore opportunities without committing too much too early. The interest in AI usually comes from a good place. Business owners know what's possible at a high level, but founders want to work more efficiently, respond to changing customer expectations, and make sure they're not overlooking important opportunities and not investing too early. The challenge is knowing which opportunities are worth pursuing, which ones are worth waiting, and where is there just too much complexity to move forward. And that's what we're going to explore today. So as we go, drop your questions in the chat on either YouTube or LinkedIn, and we'll bring them into the show as we can. Given that AI is now part of every conversation, what often slows teams down is figuring out this question of where to invest and when to invest and what the right next step is. And I'm absolutely thrilled that we have Will Callaway, former colleague at Microsoft. He's the CEO and co-founder at LightSight AI. LightSight helps private equity and mid-market organizations understand, adopt, and apply AI in meaningful and measurable ways. Will brings 15 years of experience across AI, product management, data science, and software engineering. Most recently, he's held agentic AI product work within Microsoft's data center operations. Before that, he's worked and led AI as an AI strategist with Amazon Alexa, where his work included policy, trust, ethics, user experience, and monetization. Today, Will works with organizations to build more repeatable ways to evaluate AI opportunities and make that buy versus build decision and move from exploration to implementation, what every founder wants to help their customers with. Will, it's awesome to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thanks, Kirk. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's fabulous to have you. You've got such an amazing background, and I should say you're based in Seattle. We've got a global audience, so I just thought I'd throw that in there. You're obviously the epicenter of Amazon's up that way and Microsoft's up that way, the headquarters, and boy, you've got some really fascinating background. Let's sort of start with a bit of your journey. You've worked across, as I said in the introduction there, product management, AI, data science, software engineering. You've had that experience at big companies. Tell me sort of a little bit about your background and sort of what's shaped your journey into where you are today at LightSight.
Yeah, I mean, ever since I started out of college, I really was trying to find ways to find the most meaningful impact, be able to produce a product that customers love, be able to iterate on that product quickly, take market feedback, user feedback, and keep iterating and building quickly. That sort of naturally brought me into the software product management world. And then I just kept driving into the technical side, trying to get more and more technical and hone my skills, become more dangerous. So eventually that kind of naturally brought me into the big tech scene. And so there I was, as you said, I was over at Amazon working with Alexa, solving some really difficult problems. Great people over there, really enjoyed it. Ended up over at Microsoft. Microsoft was a really interesting time. Things really got kicked off with the launch of GPT. And that was kind of beginning of my journey at Microsoft. So there was this big, hubbub about what we should be doing and how should we be investing. And that was some of the first big problems I was solving at Microsoft. So all of that experience, especially that last one at Microsoft, has really sort of shaped how I think about AI and how at LightSight we approach our problems and provide value for customers.
Yeah, fascinating. And you're involved a lot in the data center side at Microsoft as well, with sort of finding sites and like the real end-to-end process of deploying compute.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. So the co-founders and myself, when we were at Microsoft, we were leading the AI special projects team. And so GPT comes out and our leaders immediately start asking, it's time to go revisit, the big hairy problems within these business units. And within the data center world, there's several different areas of function. So think about recognizing the need to purchase a data center, recognizing where it should go, how do we stand it up, how do we operate it, how do we decommission it. And so I had the great pleasure of working with the team where they'd kind of drop us down into these business units and ask us to try and solve their major bottlenecks. And so how can we use AI to address those things and scale their operations?
Wow, fascinating. So you're probably really well positioned to think about, I love your opinion. AI, unlike like the previous era of software, where the costs of running the infrastructure, trended towards zero as you got thousands of customers, AI has obviously got a real cost. How do you think about that? Do you think the industry? Do you think founders? Do you think investors? Like, do you think we're sort of understanding this as deeply as we need to?
I think that the token side of the business is something that shouldn't stop you from trying to drive towards user value. Yes, the cost can get expensive, but if that means you have to hire less people and you can provide sort of outsized value for your product or for unlocking bottlenecks to scale your business, don't let those fears concern you. I think the people who need to be more concerned are the people who are building the data centers. That's the place where it's starting to get really expensive and difficult.
Yeah. Great advice. Great advice. Once you've got to explore to find the value, and then like once you've got some more data to determine whether you can, create value. The question is then, how much of the value can you capture, right?
Yeah, exactly. We've had a few leaders ask like, "Hey, should we be thinking about open source models?" And I'm like, you should be worrying about getting, frontier models within your business workflows first. Use the most expensive model to get things solved, and then start worrying about how to save costs on tokens later.
Yeah, that's such good advice. So tell us a little bit more about LightSight. What actually is LightSight doing? I mentioned in the opening there you're working with private equity. Just tell us a little bit more about the business.
Yeah, so I mean, as the co-founders and ourselves and myself, when we were working within Microsoft, you can imagine thinking about, hey, you don't have a lot of context for all of these complex different business units, but we want you to go in there and solve their big problems. That kind of created a natural fit for private equity, right? Because all of their portfolio companies have different problems. There's no way that someone can have, expertise in all these different areas. And so we've kind of built our knowledge and expertise around understanding, find the subject matter expert within the bottleneck, within the business critical workflow, and empower them with software and artificial intelligence. And that's what we've really been trying to focus on is how do we basically parachute into the different portfolio companies across private equity and make sure that they're able to scale their operations, and then ultimately providing those types of easy insights and data availability to private equity so they can understand how things are changing. And that's really how we got started, and we're finding a lot of success with our partnerships.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So you've worked with a number of companies so far. What do you hear from the management teams in those companies that you work for? What are they hoping AI will solve for them first?
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of 4 areas that I've been really picking up on from leaders. Is they either don't know where to start with AI, they know they need to do something, and they're experiencing that FOMO where it's like, hey, I gotta do something, I'm missing out. Or they've started something, they jumped on the hype early, but they didn't really have a lot of strategy in place to launch the initiative right. And so there's some frustration, maybe adoption is low. The third scenario that I'm seeing is that there's people getting overwhelmed with all the marketing that's going on. You start to see these demos from these products that companies that just started, yesterday, and you can't really tell what's real anymore. They're hearing things like SaaS is dead. So that buy versus build decision is getting really muddled for them. It's another way in which we try to help people out. And then they know the other kind of fourth scenario is some leaders know exactly the bottleneck they need to solve, and they just don't have the expertise to apply it. And so that's another way in which we found leaders are saying, hey, can you come in and solve this specific problem?
Yeah, right. And where do you think you create the most value? Because if you've got people that have already deployed initiatives that are not working, that's sort of a bit of a renovation project, and versus someone that knows what their business problem is. What do you find is the best kind of one of those 4 buckets to work with generally, in terms of creating value for the customers?
Yeah, I mean, I think aside from the ones where they know exactly what they want to solve, a lot of the solution or the value that we bring is trying to align AI strategy to business strategy. So we want to really start with, hey, as a business, what are you trying to do over the next 1 to 3 years? And then that's how you can start to align and implement an AI strategy. That AI strategy should be really focusing on, okay, how can I remove bottlenecks and hurdles and scale the workflows that are driving towards those longer term goals. And then when it comes to someone who knows exactly what they want, that's also a slam dunk for us, because we can get in, we can empower their subject matter experts and just immediately start building and providing value.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. Got a question from Mary in Portland. She says, I keep hearing that my company needs an AI strategy, but I'm still working out where it would genuinely help. What should I understand before I start looking at tools?
Yeah, and I think I just touched on that a little bit, but really it's where are you doing most of the mundane work of your day-to-day. I find a lot of people get kind of stuck in what I call Excel hell. They're pulling down the same type of file over and over again, and they're doing the same type of work day-to-day, week-to-week. That type of mundane, repetitive work is going to be kind of the most immediate, obvious place in which you can get an AI tool or maybe a solution built for you. After that, you get into this area of the tactical, where you're starting to ask questions of your data gathering. You just gathered a bunch of data. Now you're trying to ask questions. What are the trends? Visualize this. That's kind of the cost of asking a question. You can use AI to make that cost of asking the question a little bit cheaper, a little bit faster, and maybe enrich it with some stuff you didn't have time to do before. Maybe you can use AI to enrich the answer with market intelligence. And ultimately, we want to have your people working and living in the strategic. So you have all these answers, you have the analysis, it's time to start making decisions. You don't want AI making those calls for you. That's where you want your employees living.
Yeah, 100%. And are you finding that there's other firms that have been in customers doing the kind of work that you're doing and you're in cleanup mode? Or are you in sort of the greenfields, customers that haven't had anybody external in and maybe to try to do things themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that we're doing cleanup of outside companies, but there's usually internally companies get to a point where they've kind of built some type of prototype, or they sort of have an idea of what they want, but they don't know how to get it through that last phase into production. So this is the prototype to production phase. Really scary things come up in that area, because if you're not careful and you don't take security, compliance, scalability seriously, that prototype is only going to really work for one person. It's not going to scale across the business. And so that's kind of the area in which I wouldn't say we're cleaning up, but we're definitely trying to help provide the path forward.
Yeah, it's a great point. That whole prototyping phase that you mentioned, it's not the typical skill set for most businesses, most executives, is it? It's like usually we, historically when we're in sort of a stable economy phase, like we've been in the SaaS economy for a decade or more, it's been really stable. Everyone kind of knows what they're doing, and you evaluate a tool and it's mature and you deploy it. And but we're in this like early phase of AI, so it's more of an experimentation phase, as opposed to a selection, generally speaking. So it's a really different skill set, isn't it? And I think that's one of the things that I think a lot of company owners and leaders don't necessarily fully understand until they're up to their armpits in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's tough to go get over the hype cycle, because in the beginning, when you first start using the tools, I mean, they're designed to impress, right? So you create this HTML interactive prototype. It looks amazing, but then it's like, well, how does this live within our VPN? And how do we make sure that this is connected to data and automatically pulling things? And all of the nitty-gritty technical details come out of the woodwork right after you get to this really fun, exciting hype place.
Yeah. So if I was talking to a company who, the leadership team's kind of held off on AI and they haven't really done a major investment, what would be your recommendation for the first responsible place to look? Like what would you advise someone that's going, I know I need to be in that category that you talked about. I know I need to be in, but I haven't kind of jumped in yet. Where do I start?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important place, and at LightSight, we kind of preach this pretty thoroughly to everyone when they ask, hey, where should we start? It's going to be trying to make sure that your employees have accessible AI, the things that are easy to get to. There's not a lot of gates, or they can't use the tools they want to use. One of the first things you'll see, and humans are creatures of convenience, if they've used maybe GPT for their personal life and they've begun exploring it, but they don't have access to that within the workforce, guess what they're going to do? They're going to take the company data and they're going to put it into their personal subscription. And that's, that's a really bad thing. So I think the first place to start is to make sure you have some type of enterprise grade AI that's accessible to most of the folks in your business, whether that's Copilot, Claude, OpenAI, whichever. Just make sure the accessibility is really high. And that's probably where I'd advise someone to start with rolling AI to the business.
Yeah, it's a great piece of advice. And do you find in that context that you're having to involve sort of HR and culture change along with that conversation? Because it's not just about tools, is it? It's a big mindset shift when you start using AI.
Yeah, we'll usually recommend a steering committee to be in place. So the steering committee or the innovation council, whatever these different companies have been calling it, it's just a group of leaders that are able to kind of make decisions on how to invest. They can have financial sponsorship to make sure they can purchase the right tools. And then they have the communication channel to reach out to the employees and say, hey, here's this new AI thing. Here's our governance policy, our usage policy. Here's how we use it in our business. And we encourage everyone to do it this way. That regular meeting of leaders to kind of communicate with the business, gather feedback from the employees, that gives a lot of direction and excitement and energy to the rest of the business when they know their leaders are behind it. They're providing sort of actionable ways to use the technology. And then the employees can share back what's working. Hey, this is a great use case. Share that with the rest of the company. And that generates excitement, drives more adoption.
Yeah, I love it. That's such an important aspect of rolling out tools. I think sometimes as founders, we're guilty of getting too excited about our technology and being sort of tool-led.
Yeah.
And like doing the things that you just suggested there, where you're sort of bringing the cultural aspect and the leaders on board. It feels like you're slowing the company down. It feels like you may be slowing down deployment or sales processes, but in my experience, it kind of speeds things up in the end.
Absolutely agreed.
Yeah, okay, great. Got a question from Sophie in Wellington. She says, we're using several AI tools, but none of them fit our workflow completely. How do we know whether the gap justifies building something custom?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think what I'd recommend in that case is generally you want to be trying to go out and sample another tool. If there's a competitor tool that can fit the workflow a little bit better, the cost to swapping out the tools should be pretty low at that stage. And try it out once a quarter and try and add some measurement around, hey, when you say it's not fitting the workflow completely, how so? Is it creating too many workarounds? How many hours are spent on that workaround? Have a little bit of a baseline of the metric of what it means when it's not fitting your business. And then you get to a point where when you try out a different tool or you try to create a prototype and you're exploring a build solution instead of a buy solution, measure against the baseline. That gives you the ability to make an informed decision on should we make the effort to purchase and adopt this new tool. Yeah,
great point. Having that baseline, that's one of the biggest challenges, isn't it? Before you go deploying things, is start to get that baseline in place.
Yeah.
Another question here from Caleb in Austin. Our team built a promising prototype quite quickly. What should we prove before turning it into part of a product? That sort of gets to that baseline, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, this is sort of a tried and true product management answer from me, but it really comes down to getting user feedback as quickly as possible. It may look really cool internally, and this is what everyone's always wanted, but get the prototype in front of a user, or whether it's an external user or an internal user, just make sure that iteration process is happening. Usually if you're able to get some feedback, improve the product, you do that 3, 4, 5 times, you'll start to have a pretty clear idea if you should continue to make the investment in turning that into a product. And then finally, the big kind of scary questions when you're turning something into a product are always going to be, is it secure? Does it provide transparency for the user? And ultimately, is it scalable?
Yeah. I mean, the order that you've answered that is, I think, really important. And I look at your history in product management, which I think is, it's such a good capability base for any founder. I think it's one of the, if as an investor, when looking at founders, one of the best signals that there might be some good success here is you've got some product management in your background, because those things that you're just talking about, you think about not only how to get to the endpoint, but the journey to get to the endpoint. And what you just described there is doing some initial pilots before you worry too hard about security and scalability and all those things. Because if you can't create value, you're not going to need any security in your product, right? So I'd love to hear about, some of the learnings that you've got from your product management discipline that you're being able to apply to customers.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and always shout out to. Sorry.
Yeah, anything to share on that front?
Yeah, absolutely. So appreciate the kind words, and I think ultimately trying to understand, for me, the most important lesson that I learned when it comes to product management is that it's really easy to lose customer trust. If you roll a feature out that's not thought through, the amount of damage that can do is so significant. It burns brand trust, products, the word of mouth from your top users talking about your product to their friends. Like that issue cannot be understated. And so the best advice I can kind of give in terms of the product management mindset when it comes to the world of AI is don't roll something out because it looks cool. Roll something out because your users have told you that's what they want. And so that's kind of the biggest advice I would give. And just make sure that feedback loop. I mean, I think the feedback loop with the market has become one of the more significant bottlenecks, especially in software development. As the cost and speed of software development is getting more favorable for businesses, what's actually becoming the limiting factor is incorporating feedback at the same speed in which you can code. It did not used to be that. It used to be the flip even just a year ago.
Yeah, it's such a great point. And this is such a pertinent point for founders, talking about this all the time. And how do you as a founder not, with that desire to release something that's like well thought through and polished, how do you not fall into that trap of building something that you think is well thought through and polished, but you don't really understand the customer and the customer situation? So how do you get some of that pre-feedback? Have you got any advice for founders on that front?
Yeah, I mean, the cheapest thing, and this, I don't want to sound too, AI hype guy, but you can do some initial pressure testing with just agents, asking the agents to do some market research for you, scan a bunch of forums for you, understand what people are talking about in that area. That market intelligence power has gotten so strong with modern agentic tools that sort of gathering some of that information before you even have to have the user conversation can really help hone in on what the right value is. And then obviously I think the other kind of advice I'd give, and I've seen this work for a lot of businesses, is once you have a user base, try and identify a couple champions of your product and bring them into the fold, bring them into the development process and make sure that they're seeing the early features. They're helping give feedback on the roadmap and kind of build up that external user champion base.
Yeah, that's great feedback. And I'm seeing some founders do some great work on that agentic side. And of course, there's always the tried and true methods that come from product management, isn't there? There's sort of the user research. We go and spend time with the users. Ideally, you want to actually watch them doing their job so that you understand not what they tell you they want, but you can actually see what they're trying to achieve. Because often users don't exactly tell you what they need.
No, and what they think they want is often not what they need. So it's always important to make sure that you're doing some battle testing.
Yeah, and that comes back to your point on trust, doesn't it? So to be able to get that level of access where users will let you spend time with them to learn those things, you've got to have a really high trust environment.
Yeah, and I think that high trust environment extends internally too. If you have employees that are using Claude too much to send emails to each other or draft documents, that can burn internal trust too. It's the proliferation of kind of AI slop. And so not only do you want to make sure you have transparency with your end users and the people externally, but make sure that the right culture is in place internally so that people aren't just sending each other never been read by human documentation.
Yeah, it's not really AI slop. It's just like work slop.
Yeah, exactly.
Got a question from Bob here on YouTube. You might have to help me decipher this a bit. What should I do when I don't want to spend money, but spending money will help get the product out faster? It sounds like a bit of a conundrum. Is that like, where do I wind the token dial? Do I spend lots of tokens, or do I optimize my tokens and go a bit slower if I'm cash poor?
Yeah, I guess it's a tricky question, but I think there's a little bit of frugality that can be applied here, where if you don't have a means of getting some strong agentic platform in place, or if you don't want to spend money on the largest, expensive solution, build confidence by going and just whiteboarding some solutions with people that you're trying to sell to. And you don't have to spend money to really do this. Just try and find people online that are talking about the same thing that you're talking about or interested in, and see if they're open for a call, and just try and do some, user feedback, gather some information from them, and try and build a little bit of confidence before you need to spend money on getting something out there.
Yeah, it's great advice. And I'd probably add on to that rarely do founders need to do things faster. I mean, we think we do. We feel like this massive pressure that there's like a wave of companies like running behind us to build our startup, and customers need things quickly, and the window of opportunity is going to close. But in reality, most founders can take their time and optimize for efficiency and survival, as opposed to like spending too quickly. And sometimes investors push you to spend faster than you want to, because that's their business model. They've got a portfolio, they need an outcome, and for them, an outcome from their portfolio is better than not an outcome. And so, but for if you're a bootstrapping founder, particularly, and you want the best chances of surviving and thriving, speed is not always your friend. It's capital efficiency and the rate of learning that's better. So that may be some interesting insights.
No, yeah, I think that's a great point. We work with a few VCs, and I think even just a few years ago, there has been a lot of money thrown into businesses that are pre-revenue or don't have a proven business model. I think it's now meaning a lot more to VCs to be able to show up and say, I've proven that this product can generate money from the market, and now I'm seeking funding, as opposed to, look at this great demo or idea I have, I would like some funding.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's very, very different to build a product that people find interesting and like, and build a commercially successful business. They're like wildly different things. And if we can get too optimized around the first one without worrying about the second one, which eventually gets you into trouble. Yeah. So again, you've got some great experience on the business and the software side. How do you see the composition of software engineering change as AI adoption grows? I mean, I'm seeing massive changes in that team composition, but what are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, the most obvious thing that we've seen is the size of a team is shrinking quite a bit. And so I think even just a year ago, some might say 6 months ago, there was an era where you really needed a team of 7-10 people to own the delivery of a product or even a feature in the software world. I think that would range from the UX designer to the product manager, the architect, the engineering manager, the senior engineers, and the junior engineers. I think that's really being compressed down into primarily a product manager, a architect of some sort, a senior engineer, a junior engineer, and you embed those 3 folks within a product owner, whether that's within it with a user or someone that can give you feedback very quickly. That group of 4, I think, is really where we're seeing things converge and compress into what a modern engineering team looks like. So that's what we're seeing.
Yeah. And so you see everyone sort of the senior and the junior developer, are they like full stack? We're seeing less fragmentation by stage of the pipeline, and front end, back end, DevOps. You're seeing everyone's kind of doing a bit of everything now. How are you seeing that play?
Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately one of the first reactions that we saw in the engineering hiring world is that it became very difficult for recent graduates in the computer science to find jobs, because the power and reach of the senior engineers became so strong so quickly with agentic engineering. But I really would encourage folks to kind of flip that mental model. Is you need the junior engineers to be training underneath and behind what the seniors are doing. They're the ones that are going to be staying the excitement's going to be the highest. They're going to be closest to what the modern trends are in AI. They're going to know all the news and be familiar with what's coming out. They just spent their college years using these tools to get through school. And so I think it's important to make sure you're continuing to recruit fresh graduates.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And when you're thinking about hiring, like no one's got a ton of experience in AI, have they? It just hasn't been around long enough. What are some of your top hiring tips for the right kind of people?
Yeah, I mean, I think an easy question to kind of ask. I mean, it depends on what type of who you're hiring for, but a simple question to ask is just understanding how the person you're talking to is using AI today. If you hear them using it frequently to solve some of their regular tasks, I think that's great. I think in general, when you want to understand who to hire, you first look at your process and is there a subject matter expert within that process or within that, within your industry that can help guide whatever AI solution you're doing or whoever the new hire is. If not, that's the person you should kind of hire first. If you already have the expertise, but you're just struggling with bottlenecks, that's when you want to get someone who doesn't really need to know the subject matter as much, but they really know AI. They're using Claude and the regular to solve tasks. One of my favorite kind of quotes right now is from Boris Cherny. Like 2 months ago, he's the head of Anthropic, head of Claude. Just a few months ago, he said that he has 2 to 3 agents running all the time. And even then, I was like, I can't fathom someone's running 2 to 3 agents at all times. But now I am, and I'm starting to get how and why it's valuable. And so people who are finding ways to use it more and more, those are the people you want to bring on.
Yeah, 100%. And just one trend I'm noticing in the startup, in the founder world, is I'm starting to see more founders that are building models, their own models, as opposed to just leveraging the foundation models to build solutions on top of. Is that something you're seeing with enterprise customers and mid-market customers doing that, or is that not yet hit that space?
I don't think I'm seeing very many of the mid-market companies do that. It's a risky endeavor. You have to have a strong combination of the subject matter experts in place and a strong AI expert. And there's usually a lot of infrastructure required to be able to build something like that. So I haven't seen very much in the mid-market, the small, medium business. I think I've seen that more in the enterprise or the extremely well-funded smaller businesses.
Yeah, makes sense. Interesting one to watch. I was watching the Moonshots AI podcast this week, and they were just commenting on how quickly the foundational models are now being released. And I think one of the comments was by January, we might be seeing a new a frontier foundational model being released almost daily. Wow. If the current trajectory kind of continues, which is kind of mental.
Yeah, I can't even fathom that. Same law of the transistor, right? These things are going to keep getting faster.
Yeah, exactly. And as we were talking before the show, it's like we're past the point of trying to keep up with this stuff too. That's the other challenge.
Yeah, you got to focus on the area of what you want to keep up with because it's just too much.
Yeah. So getting back to this issue of urgency and evidence, like how would you recommend for founders, particularly that are talking to these mid-market enterprise businesses? How can they not get ahead of themselves with all this new technology that's coming out every day? What would be your advice to them when they're working with the kind of customers that you work with? How do they interface with those kind of customers and be trustworthy and relevant?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for this is kind of a conversation we were having earlier around sticking to first principles. And so sticking to kind of business first principles here is if you're trying to grow a business in terms of scalability, you really want to make sure that you have evidence of a playbook within your business. Like if you have a business model, is that business model scalable? If it's not scalable, then focus on where the hurdles are and the friction points are to scaling. And that's where you want to kind of build the repeatable, the scalable infrastructure and business model. Once you have that in place, then you can start to move with great urgency. You can start to say, okay, this is how I want to start to scale and capitalize. I don't see any friction points, and that's how I want to invest. So I would try and focus on delayed gratification, which is really difficult when all of these flashy tools are coming out left and right. But just make sure that what you're building isn't something that's going to create a sandpit for your business and your people.
Yeah. Good advice. And how well do you find that the customers that you're working with understand their own systems and processes? And just to drill down on that a little bit, when we've come from the SaaS space, we've been codifying and automating processes. But a lot of what AI is doing now is is it's that language analysis where you're understanding what people are saying and building policies that haven't necessarily been explicit. I find that we're now having to make them explicit, and that's like a new realm of business analyst world that we haven't really been in before. Certainly not to the extent that we're in. Are you finding that's a challenge for companies to really understand how to codify their processes at the level that AI can actually help?
Yeah, this is fascinating because a lot of the times we see, thankfully, we've had the pleasure of basically everyone we talk to, they know their process pretty well, or at least someone in their business knows their process really well. Everyone thinks they have very bad data. Surprise, everyone's data is bad and it's never going to be great. So don't let that stop you from trying. But the scary thing is they don't know how to modify their process to incorporate AI effectively and not create churn, confusion, and frustration. And so I think that's the sort of gap that you're talking about is, hey, if we're about to change this process, incorporate AI, how do we standardize it? How do we govern it? How do we put some guardrails around it? It's a really big problem that businesses that we talk to are facing today.
Yeah, right. And how are you, I've got some founders that are sort of going through that process with companies where they're saying, look, there's this business problem you've identified. It's a big problem. You want a solution to it, but actually getting the users involved deeply enough to understand all those decisions that are currently not really written down and not reflective in the SaaS tools that they've been historically using. There's a bit of friction and frustration on both sides. The founder's getting frustrated. They can't spend enough time with the user. The user's getting frustrated, like, how much time do I need to spend with this founder? Are you finding any of that kind of friction happening?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it can be very kind of a trust buster when it feels like someone's coming in and they're asking you to kind of map your process, and they don't have the right kind of communication style that imbues trust and partnership. You really want to make sure that what you're doing with those people is you're showing them that you're here to make their lives easier. I mentioned earlier, humans are creatures of convenience. If you're trying to show them the art of the possible of how their life can get a little easier and better, and that's kind of like your main focus, that needs to kind of breathe through in everything that you're doing. And that's what kind of leads to that beginning partnership and gets over that initial feeling of like, who is this person trying to take up all my time with this technology that I don't really trust?
Yeah. Wow. This is such an important point. I think this is, there's so much here to unpack, I think, because it's not something that is necessarily taught. Like, software engineers are not necessarily taught this. If you come from, not the technology world, you're not necessarily taught this. So I think this is like such an opportunity for founders to do better and outcompete. Do you have any kind of templates, tips, tricks, playbooks that you use when you're doing these kind of projects? Is there can you describe like your kickoff meeting? How do you sort of think about regular touch points through a project? Can you maybe just share a little bit of your insight on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky because it's fun that in the age of AI, we're learning to try and be a little more human. Ultimately, it comes down to those sort of intangible showing up and making sure that you're demonstrating kind of commitment and ownership to your user. If you say you're going to do something for them or they've asked for a feature, show them that you can deliver that really quickly. Make sure that you're not letting features go by the wayside, and you're really showing them that, hey, I listened to everything you said in that user feedback session. I've quickly implemented it. Let's go test that and get more feedback. And so I think that there has to be sort of an initial outsized level of effort from the person who's coming into the situation to be able to demonstrate the commitment, the ownership, and then ultimately transparency. I heard your feedback. This is what I did with it. This is how I did it. And this is, why we're doing it. We're doing it so that we can make your life a little easier.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear. I think, I see a lot of founders looking to, build a product and then launch it onto a website with a, download here, get your free trial kind of approach. And I think that misses this whole opportunity to release something to a smaller group of people that you have to apply for to get in, and then get this higher touch experience that you're talking about, because it gives you the opportunity to build that trust and get that feedback. And I think, historically, having been involved in so many IT projects within companies, those meetings that you're talking about are often thought of as project status meetings or project management centric.
Yeah.
Whereas everything that you described is more like, how do you turn that into a customer experience that the customer actually wants to be in, rather than just I'm going through some sort of project management checklist of risks or or whatever, right?
Absolutely.
It's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a changing time in terms of how do you connect with people. I think in a way, SaaS has kind of done this world a favor in that people saw what it means to create a product that is like really successful, really convenient, brings a lot of value. But then things started to go awry when you started to see, low barriers to entry and high barriers to exit. And when you try and cancel a subscription, it's like grayed out text and some hidden page you can't find, and you got to call somebody. I think it's just really important in this age that people can try your tool and get in, get out as quickly and easily as possible. That's going to be a great way to build some trust quickly.
Yeah, such a good point. Yeah, we're moving to this trust-led world, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got a question coming from Mason in Queenstown in New Zealand. How should a small company assess privacy and security when using an external AI platform? And like, how as a founder can I make sure my platform sort of passes that test?
Yeah, no, it's a hard one, because if you're trying to launch a product very quickly, you need to be mindful about how you advertise what kind of security and compliance you've done. So I'll break it into kind of my answer into two. One is the companies that have been around for a while and they're creating new AI features and products. Obviously, it's a bit easier to trust what they're putting out because they've gone through this for years. It gets scary when, on the other side, when you're looking at a product that's just been released and they're trying to claim things about, SOC 2 compliance or whatever security standards that they adhere to. You should be skeptical, because how can a company get some of these certifications and audits done so quickly in such a small time frame? And so just make sure that if you see things like certifications and audits that have happened for a product on the security and privacy side, ask for the information when you're doing the product demo. Like, hey, send me your SOC 2 certification. Send me this information. I want to just make sure that you've got, what you say you have.
Yeah, great advice. And I guess that's another reason why those closed beta pilot programs can be of such value, because you can create a much higher trust environment, and often you can get around not having, SOC 2 compliance by sort of opening up and showing the customer how you're going to manage security in a direct way, rather than relying on that external certification.
I think that's a fantastic advice. Is, when you're releasing a product and you haven't had time to get all of the different certifications, release your documentation, release some of your architecture information, so that anyone who's savvy enough to read it can understand this person's taking this seriously and they've done as good of a job as possible, and then leave it up to the customer to determine, is this the right level of security and privacy for me? But the first gate is going to be transparency.
Yeah, 100%. Another question here from Isaac from Adelaide. How can I tell whether an AI feature matters to customers or simply sounds impressive in a product demo? And I guess this is coming from a place of founders that show their products and customers seem to be excited. Having worked on the other side of the fence with these customers, what are customers thinking when they're reviewing these tools that they see from startups and young companies?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, right? Because people are seeing these amazing demos left and right, and I think the most important part is, one of the keys, honestly, is trying to find a referral program. So if you get a first user, that is a person that you want to really invest in. Make sure that you build partnership with them, and then that second customer that you're working with, see if your first one will be a referral. There's a lot more transparency and trust when you're able to connect someone external to your business to another prospect, and that builds the trust. I think that kind of that type of referral is really important. And then the other thing, which we've kind of already talked about, make sure people can trial your product. Like, let them use it in their workflow as easily as possible. And that will really ensure that they can see, okay, the demo is really tight with all the sample data that you've already loaded and you've walked through it in a way that you've practiced 70 times. But now I get to try it in my world and I get to see really if this works for me.
Yeah, great advice. And it really, I think goes to what we were talking about before earlier, which is the two answers you gave there, I think, speak to different stages of launching your product. And I see so many founders wanting to launch straight to general availability as
Yeah.
their first step.
Yeah.
And that is just so high risk. And if you can work individually with one customer, make them deliriously happy, they're going to be that great reference customer that you just mentioned. And
Exactly.
then do that with your second and your third. And it's only really until you've got some predictability of being able to create, really satisfied, really happy customers that you should even consider thinking about going to general availability. So I think that's a fabulous insight. And then as you say, you want to once you get past that point where you can create that value, you want to lower the barrier, don't you, for customers, to let customers to experience things for themselves and learn as much as they can for themselves. But again, the caution is doing that too early, where you're not orchestrating that is a high risk kind of strategy.
Yeah, completely agree. Completely agree.
Yeah. Is there anything that we haven't covered today? Anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't touched on? Anything exciting you're working on, or thoughts that you've got about where things are going?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any grand predictions, but I think the number one thing I would encourage people that are kind of sitting on the sidelines right now and they're not sure if they should get started is to start experimenting. Really just buy your team, or your if you're a founder and you have a small group, make sure people have access to some of these frontier models, understand how they're using it, spend some time, like lose a day or two of velocity to understand if this tool is right for you. It's worth it in the long run. And just start experimenting, gather the feedback and understand if now is the right time for you to invest in adopting some of these tools. And just don't be scared of experimentation.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I mean, don't be scared of experimentation. And you mentioned there, like, don't be scared to lose velocity. You've got to treat experimentation as a first-class citizen, don't you? It's like development and releasing is an important activity. But if you don't stop and experiment, you just never going to know what's out there. And we certainly encourage our firms to do that experimentation, but produce something, like produce a report. It can be like a one-page PowerPoint slide, or it can be like a video, a demo or something. But at least you feel like you haven't just wasted the day like scanning the web, downloading tools and trying things. You've actually done something, and you can share it with your team members. I think that's an important thing to do.
Yeah. And then absolutely. And to that point, one of the fun things that we've encouraged companies to do, obviously, this is a big deal in big tech, but, hackathons and bounties, if you have a business problem and that you've been struggling with this as a bottleneck, this is a great opportunity to take a day or two and say, hey, everybody, we're going to get together. We're going to have some fun. Lunch is on us, but we're just going to focus on experimenting and trying to solve this particular problem. At the end of the day or two, we're going to get together, present, see who did the best, and then we're going to invest in that solution. And it's just a fun, exciting way that changes up the regular rhythm of business and encourages some experimentation in a way that's constructive towards your business strategy.
Yeah, 100%. And what's been your experience with the internal makeup of the companies that you're working with? Like, if I'm a founder and I want to approach an enterprise or a mid-market company, what are some of the job roles inside those businesses? And what are their needs? Like, like if there's a CTO or a CIO, how are they thinking about things? Is there sort of, someone that's more tasked with researching these tools and looking into the tool side? Is there someone that's more thinking about things from a business point of view? Any insights that you've got on the sort of the landscape of the people in the businesses that are doing these different roles?
Yeah, I mean, it's getting really, honestly, I don't have great advice here. It's just getting really tricky because in a year ago, you used to be able to say, okay, I'm going to go talk to the engineering team. But now all of a sudden, product managers are rolling out code, and the ability to roll code is getting wider and wider. And so who do you talk to when you talk about who's contributing to the code base? It's the same thing with leaders, like the CIOs and the CTOs. The line is getting very blurry between what their role is and what the other executive's role is. And so it's difficult to figure out exactly, what is the playbook for an internal, like the makeup of a business. But it really comes back down to understand who your user is, ask around in the business about what kind of pain they're experiencing, and then see if your product lines up with the pain they're hearing. And that's a decision point for you as a founder, whether or not you take your product and you believe that this is the right direction. I'm going to keep hunting for the users that have this need, or you start to get some feedback that requires you to pivot. And so just be confident in getting the right information to make those decisions. And I think that's kind of the best advice I can give.
Yeah. That makes sense. I'm interested in, are you seeing a proliferation of AI solutions being deployed in an informal kind of production way, like we've seen with Excel forever, right? A business department will just be like, I'll just export this data and I'll put it in Excel, and suddenly that Excel spreadsheet is like a core business system, and nobody knows about it except the person that's using it. Are you seeing that sort of thing play out in the AI space, where people are building their own little AI tools? And
yeah, all over the place. So at like a file format level, like, you're seeing HTML files become the new status quo for PowerPoints, for slide deck presentations to boards. Like, HTML files are a powerful interactive tool that these frontier models can create beautifully, tied to your brand, easily, streamlined. And I can't tell you how many HTML files I've gotten in my inbox over the past 6 months versus 2025.
Yeah.
The other thing that we're seeing is people are sharing their custom projects. So they're going into ChatGPT and loading it up with a bunch of context of their business unit and what they do, and then sharing that with the rest of their team. It's a great way to sort of democratize knowledge within your team, but also it's kind of a cheat code for proxying questions and interactions cross-functionally. People are constantly asking you, hey, can I find that last slide deck? You should probably have an agent that understands your SharePoint that can answer that for them. And so just thinking about how you can share some of your knowledge in a way that's kind of systematized and agentified, it really helps the business.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, I see the same thing. HTML is like exploding, and I haven't heard of any bad security issues, and I think that's probably because I don't speak to enough people, because I'm sure there's lots of horror stories out there. But it's just such a great attack vector, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yes, it's a double-edged sword for sure.
Yeah. And what's your experience been? How are IT departments within companies trying to tackle that problem of AI spaghetti turning up everywhere? And is there a solution to that yet, or is that what are you saying?
I mean, I have a lot of respect for the problem that the current IT departments are trying to face. It's unprecedented amount of new technology and formats. It's a very tricky situation. I'll be honest, I think trying to move into this world, especially as your business is larger and larger, in a structured, strategic, and perhaps slower way is a better way to move into these decisions than trying to just get, full, hey, everyone use this, do whatever you want, put it on your personal card. That's horrifying, right? But just making sure that the IT departments have sort of the governance and the structure and a phased plan and a rollout plan to the business, I think that's generally safer. But yeah, it's tough out there for the IT folks.
Yeah, 100%. Which is opportunity, right? That's opportunity for founders to help out with exactly that problem, right?
And you're seeing a lot of the agentic platform governance. Governance is a big topic right now.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're coming up against time, but this has been a fabulous conversation. I've learned an absolute ton. Like turning pilots into and project management meetings into real user experience opportunities. Thinking about how to deploy business value more clearly. The trust issue that we've touched on. The evolution of teams that you're seeing. The importance of culture. I mean, there's just been so much really interesting stuff we've been able to touch on today, and really appreciate your time and insights, and hopefully the founders that have been watching have got some great value out of it.
Yeah, and if anyone has any more questions, obviously please reach out. And Kirk, thank you so much. It's been great being on here. Appreciate the podcast as always. And so once again, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. Well, for anyone that would like to learn more about your work, where's the best place to contact you and LightSight?
Yeah, so our website is, as you can see here, lightsight.ai. And you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn, /W Callaway, and you can scan the QR code here to find my page. But please reach out. I'd love to hear from everybody.
Awesome. Fabulous. Before we wrap up, one final question. If a founder wants to make a clear decision about AI this week, what would one thing you would recommend to a founder to do in the next 7 days?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be a broken record, but definitely start an experiment. Definitely try and make sure first, do you have access to a top model? And then two, are you using it every day? Because you probably should be. And then two, do the key people in your business, ask them the same questions. Do they have access to the right tools? And are they using them every day? What is their pain and their frustration? That'll enable you to make a decision really quickly. And it's a 15-minute conversation.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, well said. Yeah, I think just to add on to that, my one of my favorite phrases in the last year, I think, is, I'm not exactly sure where I got it from, but this concept of a dream outcome. If you're working with any kind of customer, figure out what is their dream outcome, and then what are you going to do to help them get to that dream outcome. If you're not really clear on what that dream outcome is for them, then you're probably on shaky ground. And the best way to get off that shaky ground is to figure out what that dream outcome is.
The magic wand. Yeah, totally agree.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Will. I appreciate it, and look forward to our next chat.
Awesome. Thanks, Kirk. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Will. Awesome. Well, that brings us to the end of another show. We've got a lot of great content that you can find, of course, on Leapsheep. There's a link up on the screen there to find me on LinkedIn. If you've got any questions on anything you've heard today, or just anything about being more successful as a founder, any challenges you've got, I love chatting to founders. I'm chatting to dozens of founders every week from all around the world. I just love hearing what people are building, and founders are magical because they can see the world in a way and find ways to make things better for other people. And I just love chatting to founders about that. So if you want to reach out and have a chat, please do. I'd love to learn what you're up to. Of course, we've got our next show coming up, and we have the fabulous SJ from Pitch Slap Me. And SJ's got a fabulous background of building a company, Tiny Beans, and successfully building that company, taking it to the US, exiting it, and now she's helping founders with their ability to position and tell their story. And she's built this amazing tool, Pitch Slap Me. And I'm just so thrilled to be able to chat to SJ on our next show on the 7th of August. Please don't miss that. If you've got any questions for SJ, there's a link there, that second QR code there. Please pre-submit any questions that you've got. And then finally, a quick plug for Leapsheep. If you're a founder that is looking for more clarity about your journey to get to product market fit, please reach out. We have a fabulous little offering called a strategy session, which will help you get super clear about what success means to you, exactly what resources you do and you don't have, what is the business model that is going to use those resources that you have today to reach that success, and get real clarity if you can validate or falsify that business model to get to your next milestone. And I find that this is the biggest learning that we've had over 10 years from working with hundreds of founders, is just getting clear on those things radically improves your chances of success. And I know as a founder, you're super busy and you're super constrained, but that clarity will give you back so much time and so much resources to be focusing on the one thing that matters, which is the pathway to get to commercial success. So reach out if you want a conversation or you want to learn more about that strategy session. So that closes the show. Thanks again to Will. Great show, and we'll see you on the next one.